can't look at the rocket launch, the trophy wives of the astronauts, and I won't listen to their words, 'cause I like birds.
Fletcher Smith is a wildlife biologist and has been a researcher in migratory shorebirds for 20 years. He now works for the Georgia DNR, and he's based in the Georgia Islands, where he works with red knots and other shorebirds and other birds. One of the great things about being a steward is occasionally you get to work with biologists like Fletcher. And in last year, we did the first aerial survey to count red knots. And the biologists flew from the Georgia-Florida line up through South Carolina to the North Carolina line. And the stewards got to be on the ground with other biologists confirming the count as they flew over. So when we looked up, we saw that helicopter. And when you look closer, you saw this biologist hanging out the door with a camera.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk today about red knots. Who here has seen a red knot out on your beaches? Yeah, basically everyone. If you haven't seen one, it's because you haven't been out to the beaches at this time of year. They are extremely abundant, probably the most numerous bird on Seabrook and Kiawah at this time of year. I'm going to speak briefly about the reasons that I've been studying this bird. It was recently listed as federally threatened. The population has declined by roughly 90% since the 1980s. So high counts in Delaware Bay in the 80s would approach 250,000. High counts aren't even 10% of that now. And we don't understand the reason for those declines. The status along the Georgia coast, when I first started working with them in spring 2013, status in spring was very poorly known in Georgia, and outside of some just kind of casual observations, there had been no systematic surveys for them in South Carolina. Another reason for the study is that 2 to 6% of the birds are individually tagged, so that if you can see the bird's leg and read the tag, you do not have to catch that bird again. So it's a built-in mark recapture population. Not many species have that. And so we use a multi-pronged approach. We're using geolocators, which are basically telling you where the birds migrate along the coast, radio transmitters that show local and long distance movements. We've just this past year assisted a group that was putting out satellite transmitters that gives even more accurate data. We're reciting the individually tagged knots, that 2 to 6% that's tagged. We're using aerial and ground surveys. And the reason we're doing all these different things is because we don't know exactly what will work in the end. So we just kind of throw it all at the wall and hope that a lot of it works. And thus far, a lot of it has worked. So I'm gonna really quickly talk about, this is the kind of old way that people thought about red knots in the Southeast. Way back, this was maybe around 2000 or so, It was thought that any of the birds in the Gulf Coast and potentially even into the southeast were a different subspecies that breeds in Alaska, and that the Rufa red knot was the long distance migrant. All evidence suggests at this point that all of the birds that are here are the Rufa subspecies. And then after that, this goes to even recent years. It was thought that all of the Rufa red knots would converge on Delaware Bay in spring migration. So, you know, the southeast was important. It had a lot of birds, but they would all eventually have to go to Delaware Bay to top off to be able to make it to their breeding grounds. So just keep those kind of thoughts in mind as we go through this. So I'm talking about the 2 to 6% tagged population. How you do that is it really does take a village. So people are trapping these birds in the Arctic, on breeding grounds, in fall migration, in spring migration, and on the wintering grounds. And so collectively, you know, we're trapping 2 out of every 100 birds. And so this is April last year on Kiawah. This was a group put together by South Carolina GDNR, and we trapped roughly, I think it was in the 145 range. And so, you know, you need to do that. You have population turnover, the adults are dying out, new birds are coming in. And so you have to continue trapping to maintain this, you know, level of tagged birds. And so this is one of the technicians resighting birds. This is in Georgia. And so the birds were too close to get a picture of, so she had to resight with binoculars. That's a rare occurrence. Usually we're out there some distance away from the birds, probably in the 50 to 75 meters away, and either looking at the bands through a scope or using a camera. So we record the status of the flag. Can everybody see that in the back? Yeah, that would be, in the back, I would want binoculars maybe, but you can read the code is, yeah, 8P9, and so that's like the bird's social security number. You just know every time you see that bird, where it was originally tagged, and where anybody else has seen the bird. And so this is that's another, so any green flags were tagged in the United States. This is an orange flag. Those are tagged in Argentina. And then we also encounter a fair number of flags that are pretty well sandblasted, and really the only way to resight those is with a camera. So we use camera quite often for resighting the birds. And you know, so we're out there, we're scanning those 2 to 6% of the birds are tagged. And so we're just scanning through and trying to find as many as possible. If you resight most of them, each time you go out to each of the locations that you're working, you can feed a model that will tell you how many birds have stopped in that spot through time. And so, yeah, here, starting April 1st for me, but there's people already doing resighting here. I will just be out every single day looking at red knot legs. But I never tire of this particular task. And so I just want to highlight one bird real quick. So this is a bird that I think I've resighted like 25 plus times since 2000, whenever it was tagged, maybe 2015. But it was 915. And then just in time, it's a bird that winters on the beach, and so it got sandblasted. So the 915 was pretty well, you had to have a camera to resight it. And so we caught it and replaced the band with asterisk 9C. And so now we're resighting that same bird, going on probably like 9 years that I've been resighting it. And so these are all the locations and years that it's been seen, that particular bird. And so just through time, it's just cool to follow these birds. We get them, any one bird that stays on Kiawah or Seabrook, it's probably going to stay here for the bulk of the season. So you get to know these birds. They have some annual fidelity as well. So that bird just always comes back to Georgia, and I always see it there. So, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that was done in 2021. This was a project led by Nathan Center and some undergraduate students at University of South Carolina. That's a very rare thing to have undergrad-driven project. It's really cool. But what happened was they devised a study, and so Kiawah and Seabrook was the study site. That's based on the knowledge that these sites had continuous red knot use, significant red knot use going back at least 2 decades. So it was an appropriate spot to try to get a really rigorous population estimate for a place in South Carolina. And so just through the season, they had a significant number of resites. I know some in this audience contributed significantly to that database. But so the going out every week, resighting those same birds, seeing the new ones that come in, seeing the ones that leave, that feeds a fairly accurate population model that you can estimate the total number of birds within a season that stop here on Kiawah or Seabrook. And so, this paper is readily available, and what they came up with was a population estimate with turnover of roughly 17,000 red knots. The total population estimate right now of all roofer red knots is only 40,000. So a significant portion just on these 2 islands, but that makes sense. These islands have virtually all of the birds for the March, April period. This is the hot spot of anywhere. I think even more birds than in Tierra del Fuego. So I do think that this is a critical site. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done in Georgia. I'll pretty quickly go through this. But in Georgia, like this is 2016 data. So what we've done there is do a similar thing, but hitting more sites. We don't have any site that's like Kiawah Seabrook. We don't have any concentrations for any length of time. Birds are bopping around, so we have to hit like 4 different sites per week to even get a nice amount of data to provide a rigorous population estimate. So in our 2016 season, we came up with a superpopulation estimate of just about 12,000. So there is some interchange. Some of the Kiawah and Seabrook birds are going to Georgia. There's some interchange in between there. So you would want to do the resites all at the same time to look at the true superpopulation of the Southeast. But just that data from 2021 and this data from 2016 suggests that the Southeast is much more important than, that they aren't, Delaware Bay isn't the center of the universe for this species. So we're interested in minimum length of stay. We had the lime flag birds that we detected in Georgia in 2016 would stay on average about 3.5 weeks. So if you can think of their time budget in the year, they spend a lot of time in winter at a lean weight. They don't have to be bulking up to migratory capability, but then just as they start migration, they have to put on a bunch of weight and then migrate and then go through that whole process again. So the birds that are here for 3.5 weeks, like the birds that are on Kiawah and Seabrook right now, are not trying to get to migratory weight right now. They need to get there by second or third week of May. So these birds are just trying to maintain body condition for now. They will try to pack on weight as the time gets closer. This is 2013 data. We had roughly 14,000 birds at the sites that we worked in Georgia. So, if you add all this together, you get to fairly significant percentage of the estimated population. I would suggest that the estimated population is probably low because they were never accounting for this many birds being in the Southeast. And so just prior to migration, the birds are changing. I do not hear the sound. Well, maybe the sound isn't playing through. Okay, so they get super chirpy. They do a lot. They do much more preening. They aren't feeding as much just prior to migration. So this will tell the tale. Yeah, so that guy's doing all kinds of chirping, and so they get really vocal just before migration. Let's see if I'm on.
Well, if you're trying to turn the microphone off, it's a red button on the bottom of it. I think it overrides anything on the program.
Yeah, I think so. It says mute. We'll just see on the next ones. That's it. All right. Not the end of the world if we don't hear it. It does sound cool though. So this is some information that was gathered. This was a study conducted by South Carolina DNR and others, where they put those geolocators onto birds' legs. They're not as accurate as a satellite transmitter. They determine latitude and longitude by length of day. And so there's a pretty big error, but over time you can get fairly accurate estimates of where the birds stop. And so with the geolocator data, this was the first kind of insight into the birds not stopping in Delaware Bay. So most of the birds, roughly 2/3, I believe, of the geolocator birds that were tagged down here would fly directly to Arctic breeding grounds. Once you get above the Arctic Circle, a geolocator doesn't work because it can't get the latitude, longitude by day length because it's 24. So you kind of lose them kind of at the upper end. But the more important part is that they were not all going to Delaware Bay as all the scientists previously speculated. And so this is more data. This is a paper in press. This is also information gathered from South Carolina DNR tagging efforts. And so this is showing the number of birds that either bypass Delaware Bay or stop in Delaware Bay. And it's roughly 72% of the birds do not stop in Delaware Bay, suggesting that the Southeast is even more critical because the birds are leaving from here to the Arctic rather than migrating up the coast, which everybody previously thought. And so this is that data shown in a graphic form, and it's amazing. Nobody really would have thought this prior to this study happening. And I'm hoping this will work. Yeah, here's a graphic made by Adam Smith. But these are all the migration pathways. So really with nanotags, they're short term. I think they last for about 60 days. We're gluing them on, and so it's really kind of a one-way vision into the migration. But you know, it has shown us that the birds are doing something that 20 years ago would have been just not even speculated. This is another recent batch of data from research driven by South Carolina DNR. This is a project where ruddy turnstones were tagged with nanotags, and 100% of the birds that were tagged, this is now in press, 100% of the birds that were tagged flew to the Arctic. So suggesting that the Southeast is even potentially more critical for other species of shorebird than anyone would have previously thought. I would now think that any bird, any shorebird here in the third week of May is very likely migrating all the way to the Arctic. Now I'm going to talk a bit about the aerial surveys. I'm really just going to focus on kind of one survey event. It was a pretty substantial collaboration. We attempted to survey within a 4-day window all the way from Northeast Florida all the way to Delaware Bay. We were able to do that one time, but I'm just going to talk about the Northeast Florida to basically to Seabrook line. So this is kind of what it looks like. Well, I'm just like, we're flying at 300, which is pretty high. And it's at the very limits of what I can determine a red knot. I wish we were lower and slower, but this is just the way it is. So we're flying over, and we have to determine the species and estimate the numbers. So that's what I'm seeing, because we're so high, we're not flushing birds. And so I'm seeing, and I've got to get it right, but we have a backup of the people on the ground counting, and we were also taking pictures as we were going. So we had some ways of truthing the count data. So yeah, I'm just as I'm counting, I'm just estimating, like in a flock this size, I probably just blocked out 100 in my mind, and then just said there's 2 of them, roughly. So yeah, there's error associated with this aerial count. Yeah, so this would be a similar. I try to block this out by 100. This is Seabrook. This is the flock on the 18th, I believe, at Seabrook. This was Ogeechee Bar. That's our best site in Georgia. It's a horseshoe grab site. Seabrook and Kiawah are more donax. So it's a species of bivalve that the birds are eating here. I'm unaware if any horseshoe grab spawn takes place here, and so I think all the birds, the red knots that are here, are eating donax. These guys are eating horseshoe crab eggs. So yeah, that was tough. This was just, I just was just like, threw my hands up in the air. I was like, 4,000. But then we go back through and we dotted them. I got super lucky. It was like 4,096. But yeah, so the post-processing by the technician, it took forever. It's really hard to go through. You have to zoom in on every single one of these, put a dot on it, keep track, count them. It is not fun. But we found a really accurate way of not only checking the count, but in some cases, the camera person would see the flock and take a picture that I didn't see. So it acts as a double observer as well. So yeah, we had on a one-day count from Northeast Florida, and maybe this includes Janet. I can't think right now if this is the actual number. Maybe it was 13,000. But we had over 10,000 on May 18th, and so that's pretty late. Those are all birds that are going to migrate from here. It's a fairly substantial number, maybe the highest late count like that that has taken place. Now I'm going to talk about the food resources, the reason why there are so many knots here. I think the high count in recent years is in that 5,000 to 6,000 range. That's a significant number, and there just are very few places on Earth where you would ever see that many red knots. And so they're here because of this species. It's the genus Donax. It's dwarf surf clam, I think is the common name. And for whatever reason, Seabrook and Kiawah have the most abundant Donax. And this has been a long-term thing. So we're talking about at least 2 decades where your islands have produced this crazy amount of this bivalve. I study red knots all over Virginia, Georgia, and there are Donax sites, but usually there's a cycle to them. They're cyclical, and you'll see one site will just peter out and then a new one will pop up. So I can't explain why the site is so good for so long, but it's pretty awesome that that's going on here. And so this kind of shows, this is just some data from one of the Georgia years, just kind of showing this is a Donax site. And so this is April, this is May. And so we get an eye count and then the numbers just kind of drop off. Red knots transition their primary diet, and that's why you'll see so many birds here in March and April, and then the numbers will drop and decline by May. So this is a site where we have horseshoe crabs. So it starts out in April with no birds at all, and then it builds up. So this must have been a tremendous horseshoe crab spawning event, and then numbers kind of, pretty steady and high after that. So birds are moving, sometimes long distances, sometimes 60 miles, 100 miles between sites, probably prey sampling along the way, somehow communicating that to the other birds, but they're able to find these sites. Same thing, this is a site that doesn't have Donax, but it does have horseshoe crab. So you can see the seasonality changes. And so this is red knots eating Donax. This is in Georgia. Out here, it's more like what we see for horseshoe crab, where it's more of a feeding frenzy. This is what we see in Georgia. It's just kind of like a herd of cattle moving through and just kind of picking and pecking and hoping that they find Donax. But what I've seen out on your beaches is full-on feeding frenzy, similar to what I'll show you that we see with. So this is a horseshoe crab spawning site. This is right next, adjacent to Turtle Island. This is a little 50-foot section of beach called Tybee Island National Wildlife Refuge. Yeah, no sound, but there's nothing I can do about that. They're real squawky. When they're in a feeding frenzy, it's similar out here. They just they're real vocal, not very territorial though. But these are all red knots in spring 2019, feeding on horseshoe crab eggs. Yeah, maybe the high count during this time, during that season was about 2,400 literally in a 50-foot stretch of beach that just had a lot of horseshoe crab spawning on it. And let's see what this is. Oh, this is the classic feeding frenzy. So this is, and it's not just red knots, it's sanderlings and other shorebirds as well. But when they find a nest at the right tide, they just kind of encircle it, and they're eating the crab eggs. And so they're just kind of bouncing around looking for nests. But sometimes, so this is 2019. This is something that I've only seen twice down here. It's common in Delaware Bay, where there's so many crabs spawning that it brings all of the eggs to the surface. And so that can happen through hydrology or geology as well. But this event brought a bunch of eggs to the surface. I don't know if people can see, but like all these little dots are horseshoe crab eggs. So the birds don't even have to work. So yeah, all of that is just eggs. So they're just picking them off the surface. And so this time of year, when you're starting to talk into the May time period, these birds are trying to put on migratory weight. So they're going from probably around 100 grams when they first arrive here. They have to depart in the 140 to 180 range. And so they're putting on significant amounts of fat, sometimes nearly doubling their weight. That's because of that flight from here to the Arctic is nonstop. They're likely arriving to the Arctic when conditions aren't ready for them to start feeding yet. So they have to put on enough fat to not only get there, but maybe go several weeks without feeding and produce eggs. So this site is critical to the continued survival of the species. Lots of challenges. So this is where all those people that raised your hands as stewards, this is where you contribute heavily to the continued, the continuation of the species. So we have lots of human disturbance issues that can be dogs as well, terrestrial and avian predators. There are a lot of things that would like to eat a red knot. And then these continued, the higher tides, climate change, more hurricanes. And then what we've seen, at least what I've seen locally, is just fewer of these horseshoe crab spawning sites where there's such abundant spawning that it brings the eggs to the surface. So there are fewer of those as well. So this is a study I was tangentially involved in, but I felt like it was still pretty cool to show here. So these are all the peregrine falcon nesting sites in Virginia. Peregrine falcon was it was extirpated from the east. And so the only places that the birds would come back to were not within their historic range. They basically built man-made doghouse boxes out on stilts, out in the marshes, and that's where all the peregrines were reintroduced, not to their mountain historic range. And so this is data showing proximity to those sites. And so right directly adjacent, what's that, 0 to 3 kilometers away from the nest, there's basically no red knots at all. So this is the number of red knots, and this is proximity to the peregrine nest. So once you get more than 6 kilometers away from a nest, you start seeing bigger red knot numbers. So that's an unintended consequence of the reintroduction that we thankfully do not face here. Peregrines definitely like to eat a red knot here. And, dogs like to chase birds. It's one of their favorite things. I feel like dogs and kids can't pass up an opportunity. And then there's just very few sites that have significant horseshoe crab spawning. So this is Ogeechee Bar, where those roughly 4,000 birds were spotted. And you'll just, it's an isolated, I'm often the only person, the only human out on this. And so it's an awesome spot, but other people want to go out there and boat as well. And then we have just places that get significant, like 100+ boats on a weekend. And so luckily, it's usually not great weather prior to the birds migrating. So they kind of get in and get out before the chaos of the summer happens. This is an emerging problem that I've been seeing. So feral hogs have developed a taste in the past, maybe this problem is 15 or 20 years old, but I see it expanding. This is that same site that had all those red knots that I showed earlier, the clip. So the hogs just go through and uproot all the horseshoe crab nests and just kind of eat the sand with the eggs in it. And then you can, so there's things like avian flu and there's stuff and it's going back and forth between mammals and birds. And like this would be I could see that happening here. This is sanderlings feeding within the uprooted horseshoe crab nesting site. And so that's an emerging threat and one that we're gonna try to alleviate. But the hogs uprooting it brings the eggs to the surface, and so these birds that would typically only be able to forage on eggs at high tide are able to just kind of go through the uprooted sections of beaches to feed on the eggs. And so the conservation actions, the ones that I would want you to take away from here is that just talking to people on the beach and making them aware of this amazing thing that the birds are doing, flying from South Carolina directly to the Arctic. They need this place. Usually people are cool, and if you present that information, they'll put their dog on a leash and not let it chase. So that's, I think, the take home here. You have a lot of human activity on your beaches. Some dogs are allowed on the other side, not kind of where the birds are here. The dogs are not allowed, so that's less of an issue, but humans disturbing them can also have an impact. So yeah, if you have people visiting and they don't know about the birds, tell them about the birds, have them walk around the flocks. Usually the people that I talk to out there are think it's very cool that this thing is happening. So let's see. This is our partner Manamet made this for a pamphlet. The reason that dogs disrupt the red knots and other birds is because they look like a fox or a coyote. The birds can't tell the difference. So a dog running off a leash in a bird colony is going to make all of the birds flush away. Even if the dog is, like everybody says, my dog wouldn't eat eggs or the bird, it still is extremely disruptive. And so we're just trying to limit the disturbance to the birds. So that's the main goal, is to bring them here, fatten them up, and then send them on their way. That's like the goal. And so this upcoming year, we're going to be doing, and it's already started, South Carolina, DNR, and partners are already resiting in South Carolina, but we're going to try to do more or less a coast-wide resite project where we hit the main sites in South Carolina and Georgia at the same time to be able to build a better population estimate. So that's ongoing. That will be this year and next year. If you're intrepid, have a good camera, maybe we can put you in touch with Mark. We would definitely like people that to get out and help us recite, but it's not as easy as just talking to people on the beach, but we would welcome that. So yeah, we'll be working, what is it? We have about 8 sites total, and hopefully at the end of that, we'll have a nice, well, at least a number that makes sense out of all of it. And so this is one that I've been looking for. This is I've done several seasons of Arctic research, and I only ever encountered one red knot chick. And so we put that flag on it, and that's one I'll take any questions that anybody has. Yeah, Alan?
So Mark, when they're going after clams here, is that just random searching or do they sense them under the surface?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, how do the birds know where the clams are? I think that, so what is very likely happening is they remember where they got the clams yesterday, and there's just so many of them here that are prey sampling that some of them find them. How they communicate that to the rest of the roosting groups, because when you're out here, when they start to feed, they're all flying together, they know exactly where to go. So I think they remember previous days, and then somebody was lucky and found them. But you know, when people are walking through, when there's human disturbance, they will go to other sites. So, okay, I will say this though, when they find the significant numbers of donax here, and they go into a feeding frenzy, that's something I've never seen at any other site. So there is definitely something special going on here.
And you mentioned that the donax population here seems to be, you know, not as cyclical or steady. Is there much work going on studying donax density, total populations here on our two islands and trends? Are they safe or are they increasing or decreasing? Do we know?
I think we do not know. Is that correct, Janet? Yeah. So I don't believe that anybody has done a systematic look at density distribution. We just simply know it's high because of the birds are showing us, but the donax themselves have not been studied.
Those flight path maps seem to show intermediate stop around the Great Lakes and then a jump up to the Arctic. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I should have explained that. So the intermediate stops, if there aren't many intermediate stops. That's just simply where there's another radio tower that detected the bird. So most of the jumps are nonstop flights from here. There may have been some stopovers of several days where the birds are either they hit storms or something and have to just kind of rest. But there's no place for a red knot to forage in the Great Lakes. So if they are stopping there, it's not to feed, it's just simply to rest, maybe avoid a storm.
I'm from Chicago, and we had Monty on First Beach, the red knot was tracked for years.
Yeah, Monty is a piping plover.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We're good though. Piping plovers are awesome as well.
Could you explain horseshoe crab eggs and where are they being laid right out here?
Yeah, so the nearest kind of sizable horseshoe crab spawning site would be DeVoe Bank. And so what happens is on the lunar events, so like new moon, full moon, big tides, the crabs come out of the water, dig a nest 6 inches deep, deposit their eggs. They can, it's over 10,000 eggs. It's a lot of eggs in one spot. And then if you have repeated visits by a substantial population, that's when the females dig up previous nests, bring those eggs to the surface. So you need a substantial spawning event of many hundreds of female crabs spawning in the same area to bring eggs to the surface. That's really the only thing that matters to a shorebird. The spotty out in the marsh spawning, which happens everywhere, that's of no biological importance. They just need these few sites where there's substantial spawning, and then there aren't that many of them, and there are fewer of them than there were historically.
How's the horseshoe crab population?
I can't speak to that. Well, okay, so the horseshoe crab is surveyed via offshore trawl surveys, and the fisheries side of things The Atlantic State Marine Fishery Council says that the trend line is stable.
I'm trying to understand how the rednuts use their time when they're here. And so, did I understand it right that they sort of come and maybe just rest and feed and don't really get down to business and get serious about packing on their migratory weight until May?
I think it is, maybe Janet would know better. I think the birds are leaving starting the 16th of May. And maybe bracketed, so 16th of May through maybe 25th of May. That's the window that they have to migrate during. And so the birds that are out there right now, this is March, I do not believe that they're trying to put on migratory fat.
So they're just sort of resting, feeding, hanging out, and gathering until then?
Yeah, but the donut, they have to eat.
Yeah.
They just don't have to double their weight. And so this is still critical to their life cycle, what's going on out there. But I do not believe at this point that they would be putting on migratory weight.
And that would be early May that they would get serious about that?
I think late April you're starting to talk, but I don't know, and potentially Felicia or Janet would be able to better. You'd want captures throughout the season to look at just the weight gain, and so I haven't personally seen that. I should have asked if that was available.
How about the rewind? Once they get up, they're gonna come back. They have to get to Tierra del Fuego.
Yes, I should have, there are critical stopovers in fall migration as well. This just doesn't happen to be one of them. They're launching from Gulf of St. Lawrence. They're launching from Monomoy. Some birds come down and do winter here. Not all of them winter in Tierra del Fuego. The birds that are out here right now very likely wintered from north coast of South America, maybe up through, some of them probably did winter here. So the birds that are out here right now are not the Tierra del Fuego birds. Those birds do not arrive until kind of the first week of May.
Why is it that we see so few live horseshoe crabs?
I think the reason you see few live horseshoe crabs here is because this is high energy beach, so horseshoe crabs need a more sheltered place to spawn. And so like if you can think of DeVoe out there, it's kind of built like a horseshoe, so they spawn in the inside of that. Waves flip them over and kill them, and so they just don't spawn in these high energy ocean facing beaches.
Yeah, it's Boston Scientific that collects their blood, or one of the companies out of Boston, I know. And I know they fish for or capture them in Guam here.
Yeah, there is a local outfit that is harvesting horseshoe crabs for the biomedical industry. I do not believe that's not a Boston company. That's a local company that's doing the harvesting here.
What's the lifespan of these guys?
Red knots, the longest known Rufa red knot, I think, was 22 years. Many of these birds that we're resighting are in the 15 to, like, I've just seen them age. They were all tagged in like 2004 through 2006 in Florida, a lot of the older ones anyways. And so, yeah, we have a whole cohort of birds that are in that 15, 17 range. They're long-lived. They have low reproductive success. So but the adults are long-lived. So the adults make it up to the breeding grounds, but very rarely produce enough chicks to keep the population trending up. It's a strategy that a lot of animals have. They're long-lived, low reproductive success, because it's such a stressful event for them to get up there and then successfully breed. Any more questions? All right.
I can't look at the rocket launch, the trophy wives of the astronauts, and I won't listen to their words, 'cause I like birds.